Step away from the vehicle, pal. You clearly don't live in this zip code.
Excuse me? This is my driveway. I live right here.
Drop the attitude. I know a break-in suspect when I see one.
I'm the U.S. attorney for this district. Put the light down.
I don't care who you think you are. Turn around now.
You make one mistake here, officer, and your career is over.
Step away from the vehicle, pal. The command cut through the dim lobby like it owned the air. Ethan Lockhart's voice was young, practiced and loud enough that the receptionist flinched behind the acrylic window. Xavier Ramirez had one hand on the steering wheel of his idling sedan, the other holding a canvas brief bag on his lap, frozen halfway between arriving and being accused. What Ethan was about to do was simple turn a routine stop into handcuffs. What Ethan claimed was also simple: Xavier didn't belong here. And somewhere behind that claim, a consequence was already taking shape quietly, steadily, because this moment would not stay contained. You clearly don't live in this zip code, Ethan added, taking one step closer, flashlight already up, beam spearing through the glass and catching dust in the air like smoke. Xavier blinked hard, feeling that familiar sting behind the eyes, the heat of being evaluated as a problem. He had driven straight from the federal building, tie-loosened jacket folded carefully on the passenger seat to keep the creases sharp. He'd eaten half a protein bar at a red light because he hadn't had time for lunch. This stop was supposed to take 5 minutes, check a storage unit he rented for evidence boxes that had to be transferred to a locked room by morning, then drive home and try to catch his daughter before she fell asleep. "Excuse me," Xavier said, keeping his voice low, controlled. Ethan's beam shifted to Xavier's hands, then to the brief bag. His jaw worked like he was chewing the decision in real time. He wasn't a cartoon villain. He was a rookie officer who believed control meant winning the moment in front of witnesses, and that hesitation looked like weakness. "This is my driveway," Xavier said, gesturing toward the painted curb cut that led into the building's loading lane. "I live right here." The receptionist, an older woman with glasses on a chain, leaned forward, eyes narrowing. A man in a hoodie near the elevator paused with one earbud, still incensing the shape of conflict. The lobby suddenly felt too small for the volume Ethan was using. And that was the first breadcrumb. 3 phones rose almost at once. Nobody announced it. Nobody asked permission. They just did what people do now when authority starts bending reality, because the easiest kind of proof is the kind you can't talk out of later. "Drop the attitude," Ethan snapped, like Xavier's calm was disrespect. Xavier swallowed, the sharp reply rising in his throat. He could feel his hands starting to tremble, not from fear of Ethan, but from the humiliation of being talked to like he was already guilty. He set the brief bag down slowly on the passenger seat, palms open where the light could see. "Officer," he said, "steady. What's the reason for this?" He kept his eyes on Ethan's face, not the flashlight. "Am I free to leave?" That question should have slowed things down. Instead, Ethan's shoulders squared, as if Xavier had challenged him in front of an audience. "I know a break-in suspect when I see one." Ethan said it like a verdict, like it was a gift to everyone watching a simple story they could accept without thinking too hard. The viral quote landed clean, 8 seconds of certainty, something people could caption. It was short enough to travel. And later, when the story came back around, it would return like a boomerang. Xavier could hear his own heartbeat over the hum of the building's lights. He glanced past Ethan to the lobby security desk, a small station with a clipboard and a ring of keys. If he left now, Ethan could call it fleeing. If he stayed, Ethan could make it worse. Why not just leave wasn't a real option when the threat was already in the room, and the exit path was effectively controlled by the man holding the narrative. Sir Ethan barked, voice rising again. "Step out? Now." Xavier lifted his chin. "I'm not resisting," he said. "But I'm asking again, what's the reason I'm requesting a supervisor?" Ethan's flashlight beam wobbled for the first time. Not fear, calculation. A young employee from the self-storage office emerged through a side door with a lanyard and a half-eaten bag of chips, freezing when she saw Ethan's stance. Her eyes flicked to Xavier, then to Ethan's hand hovering near his cuffs. She wasn't sure what she'd walked into, and her uncertainty, the bystander misread, fed Ethan's story. "Everything okay?" she asked, too soft. Ethan seized it. "Ma'am, go back inside," he said, not looking at her. "We've got a suspicious person matching a situation." Xavier's lips pressed together. Matching what exactly a situation wasn't a description. It was a permission slip. "This is my driveway," Xavier said again, louder so the lobby could hear. "I'm here on business." His voice stayed controlled, but his face burned. "I want a supervisor." The receptionist's hand disappeared under the counter. A second later, her phone came up, not filming, yet just ready. The man in the hoodie near the elevator spoke for the first time, calm and plain. He's asking why the man said. He's not resisting. That was the witness circle forming, not a mob, not a chant, just a ring of ordinary people anchoring reality with quiet sentences. SE05 in motion, the simplest kind of solidarity. Ethan's radio crackled at his shoulder. He tapped it, then didn't speak into it. For a moment, Xavier saw the rookie in him, the part that wanted to finish this without asking anyone older for help. Xavier made a choice that wasn't about ego. It was about containment. "I'm the U.S. attorney for this district," Xavier said, and he kept his tone level like he was stating the time. A half-second of silence. Not belief, just a pause where Ethan's brain had to decide whether to verify or to dominate. "Put the light down," Xavier added, blinking against the beam. Ethan didn't lower it. He angled it higher like he could force the truth out through discomfort. "I don't care who you think you are." Ethan said the sentence sharp enough to split the room. This was the second breadcrumb that sentence would be repeated later word for word by someone who could not be intimidated by it. Ethan's hand snapped out and caught Xavier's forearm, not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to claim ownership. The line was crossed in front of phones, in front of the receptionist's widening eyes, in front of the storage employee's frozen posture. "Turn around now," Ethan ordered. Xavier's stomach dropped. He felt the near loss coming like a wave. The humiliation of being spun around in his own driveway. The risk of a wrist wrench. The danger of a rookie escalating to resisting because someone flinched. He pictured his daughter's face when he came home late, if he came home at all, and forced his shoulders to loosen. "I'm not resisting," he said again louder. "I'm requesting a supervisor. Please state the reason." The man in the hoodie stepped closer, phone steady at chest height. The receptionist slid her chair back and stood. The storage employee finally found her voice shaky but present. "He said he lives here," she told Ethan. "He said he's the U.S. attorney." Ethan's grip tightened. A rookie mistake born from the need to save face, he refused the easiest proof in front of witnesses, because accepting it would mean admitting he'd been wrong about the zip code story from the beginning. Xavier turned his head slightly enough to speak, without giving Ethan the satisfaction of controlling his whole body. "You make one mistake here," Officer Xavier said, each word measured, "and your career is over." Ethan's eyes flicked just once to the phones. He heard the witness circle without wanting to. "Sir," the man in the hoodie said calmly, "you're on camera." He asked why. "He's not resisting." Ethan snapped his radio up. "Dispatch, I need a unit," he said, voice clipped. He didn't say why. And here came the first imperfection. The lobby's ceiling speaker crackled, with the distorted announcement something about package deliveries and after-hours access, and it briefly drowned out Ethan's next words. Xavier caught only a fragment matching and detained enough to know Ethan had chosen escalation. The muffled audio would later become a small problem. One witness would mishear a command and repeat it incorrectly, giving Ethan a moment of room to argue. Not enough to save him. Enough to delay. Xavier's mouth went dry. He could feel his pulse in his fingertips. He hated that his body reacted like this, like he was the one doing something wrong. He forced his voice even. "I do not consent to any search," he said. "I'm requesting a supervisor." Ethan leaned in low enough that he thought the room wouldn't hear. "You're making this worse," he muttered. Xavier didn't take the bait. He shifted his weight slightly, careful not to jerk. "Please state the reason," he repeated. The receptionist stepped out from behind the window phone, now fully up. "Officer," she called, voice polite but firm, "we have cameras in here." Ethan's head snapped toward her. "Ma'am, get back behind the counter." She didn't. She stood in place, shoulders set. "No," she said quietly. "He's calm. You're escalating." That was the micro-turn. The receptionist wasn't a bystander anymore. She was a witness with authority in the space, a person who could report what happened to building management without fear of retaliation. The second imperfection arrived fast. The man in the hoodie's video shook as his hand trembled. Adrenaline, not drama, and the frame blurred for 2 seconds when someone brushed past him. Later, Ethan would claim the shaky moment hid aggressive movement. The claim would fail, but it would buy Ethan another minute. Xavier's mind ran through risk like a checklist. If Ethan put cuffs on, this could spiral into injury. If Xavier tried to walk away, Ethan could chase and call it fleeing. If Xavier raised his voice, Ethan could call it threatening. The safest path was the most infuriating one, staying still and letting the system show itself. The backstory insert came not as a biography, but as a flash of routine triggered by humiliation. Xavier wasn't new to being watched. He'd grown up learning how to keep his hands visible in stores, how to say sir without swallowing pride, how to laugh off questions that weren't asked of other people. Now, as a federal prosecutor, he carried the same discipline into his work. He kept a small notebook in his brief bag with a list of calls to make people to check on, and a reminder written in tight handwriting, "Be the calm in the room." He'd built a reputation for being steady under pressure, the kind of attorney who didn't grandstand and didn't threaten. He hated that tonight calm was being used against him like an insult. A second unit finally arrived, another officer older stepping into the lobby with a slower posture and a hand already on his own radio. He saw phones. He saw the receptionist standing out from behind the counter. He saw Ethan's grip on Xavier's arm. "What's going on?" the older officer asked. Ethan spoke fast, the story already rehearsed. "Suspicious male. Said he lives here. Refusing to comply?" Xavier turned his head, voice steady. "I complied. I asked for the reason. I requested a supervisor." The older officer looked at Xavier's suit jacket on the passenger seat, the brief bag, the way Xavier's hands were opened. He looked at Ethan, and then at the ring of phones. "Let's slow down," the older officer said. Ethan released his arm. Ethan hesitated. The rookie pride fought for one more second. "Release," the older officer repeated, firmer. Ethan let go. Xavier flexed his wrist, hiding the relief behind a neutral face. This is the moment it turned. The storage employee stepped forward, now emboldened by the arrival of someone who looked like he'd actually listen. "Officer, she said he rents a unit here. I've seen him before. He's on the paperwork." Ethan scoffed. "That doesn't prove anything." And there it was, DV1 in public selective proof rejection. Ethan refused the easiest verification because he'd already committed to the suspicion story. Xavier inhaled slowly. "I'm the U.S. attorney for this district," he said again, not louder, just clearer. "I'm requesting a supervisor." The older officer's eyes narrowed slightly, not in disbelief, more like recognition that Ethan was standing on a cliff edge and didn't know it. "Do you have ID?" the older officer asked. Xavier's fingers moved toward his inner suit pocket, then stopped. "I can provide it," he said, "but I'm asking, am I being detained? If so, for what reason?" Ethan's mouth tightened. "He's stalling. He's asking questions," the receptionist said, calm. "You didn't explain the reason." The witness circle held steady, narrating reality into the record. Ethan spoke over them. "Turn around," he said again, reaching for Xavier's elbow. The older officer stepped between them, palm out. "No," he said. "Not unless you can articulate a reason." Ethan's face flushed. "You're undermining me," he muttered. The older officer didn't blink. "I'm preventing a mistake." The near loss hit anyway, just in a different form. Ethan turned his frustration into retaliation by aiming for what he could control. "Fine," Ethan said loudly. "Then you're trespassing. You can leave." Xavier looked past him at the door at the driveway lane outside. "This is my driveway," he said, voice still controlled. "I'm here for a legitimate purpose." Ethan pointed toward the exit. "Leave now or I'll arrest you." The lobby went still. Phones held steady. The receptionist's lips parted, breath caught. The storage employee took a half step back, fear rising, because now it was not just humiliation, it was the threat of a false arrest in front of witnesses. Xavier felt a cold clarity settle in. "I'm not leaving," he said, "because you're threatening arrest without explaining a reason. I'm requesting a supervisor." Ethan's hand dropped to his cuffs. Metal clinked. A sound that makes people comply even when they're right. The older officer's radio crackled. "Sergeant en route," a voice said, distorted. Ethan leaned close to Xavier again, voice low. "You make this hard, I'll make it hard," he said, thinking his words wouldn't travel. But the witness circle was closer now. The man in the hoodie caught it. The receptionist caught it. The storage employee caught the shape of it, even if she didn't hear every syllable. "Sir," the man in the hoodie said, voice calm, "we heard that." Ethan snapped upright. "No, you didn't." "Yes," the receptionist said. "We did." The second backstory insert came in short, grounded flashes. Xavier's phone buzzed in his pocket, his daughter's bedtime reminder. He'd promised her he'd read one chapter of her favorite book, the one with the dog-eared corner where she always fell asleep. He'd promised himself he wouldn't bring work home like his father did. He'd been raised by a neighborhood that taught him to protect his name because the world would try to take it away. Tonight, he could feel that old lesson in his bones, not as pride, but as duty. Don't let them rewrite who you are while you stand there silent. A patrol sergeant arrived, boots heavy on tile eyes, scanning the room the way experienced leadership does. Counting phones, counting witnesses, reading posture. "What is this?" the sergeant asked. Ethan jumped in, voice fast. Suspicious person refused to comply, tried to argue. "I was maintaining standards." The older officer spoke next slower. He asked for a reason. He requested a supervisor. Ethan escalated. Xavier kept his voice plain. "I'm Xavier Ramirez. I'm the U.S. attorney for this district. I'm requesting a supervisor because Officer Lockhart is threatening arrest without stating a reason." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's lying." The sergeant's gaze settled on Ethan, then on Xavier's calm posture, then on the phones. "Officer Lockhart," the sergeant said, "what's the actual reason for detention?" Ethan opened his mouth and nothing credible came out. Not a description, not a call, not a report. Just the earlier coded line echoing in everyone's head zip code. The sergeant's face hardened. "Sir," he said to Xavier, "do you have identification?" "I do," Xavier said. I'll provide it. I'm not resisting. He moved slowly, narrating his own movements like he'd been trained by life. He handed over his credential wallet without flourish. The sergeant read it, then lifted his eyes. The room held its breath. This was the freeze moment. Phones held steady. The receptionist's hand trembled, but didn't drop. The storage employee stared at Ethan with the dawning realization that her workplace had just become a stage for something bigger than a suspicious person. The sergeant's voice dropped to a controlled, dangerous calm. "Officer Lockhart," he said, "step over here." Ethan protested, desperate now. "Sarge, he was being disrespectful. He was giving me attitude." Xavier didn't speak. He didn't need to. The witness circle did what solidarity does. It made sure attitude couldn't replace facts. He asked why the man in the hoodie said. He asked if he was free to leave. "He said he lives here," the receptionist added. "You didn't listen." The sergeant looked at Ethan again. "You said, 'I know a break-in suspect when I see one.' Did you say that?" Ethan's throat bobbed. You did," the storage employee blurted, then covered her mouth, eyes wide at her own bravery. That viral quote had landed, and now it was coming back. The sergeant turned his head slightly toward the older officer. "Start collecting statements," he said. "Names and contact," calmly. Xavier finally exhaled slow, like he'd been holding his breath for 10 minutes. Now the institutional backbone began to show itself, not as a miracle, but as a sequence of roles doing their jobs because the pressure in the room made it impossible to do otherwise. A watch commander arrived on the radio voice, more authoritative, even through distortion. The sergeant stepped aside, gave a brief summary, then asked for guidance. The storage facility's operations manager, called by the receptionist, appeared in the lobby in a button-down shirt, confused and irritated until he saw the badge, the uniforms, the phones. "What's happening?" the manager asked. The receptionist spoke fast, controlled. "Officer Lockhart tried to detain a tenant in the driveway. He claimed he doesn't live in this zip code. There are witnesses." The manager's face tightened. "This is a business," he said, eyes on Ethan. "We cooperate with law enforcement. But we don't do harassment." Ethan scoffed, trying to regain control. "He's trespassing." The manager snapped his head. "No, he's not. He has a unit. He's allowed here." Xavier stayed quiet, letting the structure form around him. The sergeant lifted a hand palm outward. "No one is trespassing," he said. "Everyone stays calm." Then, in the active heat of the scene, the first documentary anchor appeared. Category A rotated away from A1 and B2 as instructed. "A 3-body camera is running," the sergeant said loud enough for the lobby to hear. "Officer Lockhart, you are being recorded. Keep your hands down and your voice professional." Ethan's eyes flicked again, the recalculation visible now. He couldn't dominate a record. The second documentary anchor came from a different category inside the same living moment, not as a summary. B3. The receptionist pointed to her desk phone. "I called security dispatch," she said, voice steady. "They logged it when the yelling started." The sergeant nodded once, sharp. "Good. That was it. Exactly 2 anchors. Enough to pin the story down in something harder than argument." Ethan tried one last pivot. "He said he's the U.S. attorney. That doesn't make him above the law." Xavier finally spoke again, controlled. "No one said it did," he said. "I asked for the reason. I asked for a supervisor. That's it." The watch commander arrived physically 10 minutes later, moving straight to the sergeant with the posture of someone who could smell a liability in the air. He looked at Xavier. "Mr. Ramirez," he said carefully, "are you okay?" Xavier's lips pressed together. He could feel the aftershock in his hands, the tremor he'd been hiding. "I'm okay," he said, "but this cannot happen to anyone else." The commander nodded. "Understood." Ethan cut in, voice strained. "So what? I'm in trouble because he's important." The commander turned to him, eyes cold. "You're in trouble because you escalated without a reason." Ethan's face twisted. "I was maintaining control." The older officer spoke calm. "Control isn't the job. Safety is." The operations manager stepped up, voice tight. "Officer," he said to Ethan, "you pointed a light in a tenant's face and threatened arrest in my lobby. That's not safety." The witness circle stayed. Not screaming, not gloating, just present, lending weight to the truth. Later, when the adrenaline dropped, Xavier would remember something small, the receptionist silently sliding him a cup of water from behind the counter, like she'd done it 100 times for shaken customers. He took it with both hands because his fingers were still unsteady. The commander instructed the sergeant to separate Ethan from the scene. Ethan was told to stand by his patrol car while statements were taken. He tried to argue, but his voice had lost its audience. Xavier watched Ethan go, then turned to the receptionist. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded, once eyes moist. "I'm tired," she said, voice almost too soft to hear. "I'm tired of seeing it." Xavier's throat tightened. He understood exactly what she meant. What came next? did not happen in a single cinematic sweep. It came in steps the way real accountability sometimes does when it's forced into daylight. Within days, the footage and witness statements were preserved by supervisors who knew the city's risk exposure was now real. Internal Affairs interviewed the older officer and the sergeant. The operations manager provided the dispatch log reference and confirmed the facility's tenant status without needing to dramatize it. Ethan's training officer was pulled into a meeting he hadn't expected to have. The watch commander's report went up a chain where people spoke in terms like public trust and liability and pattern risk, because those were the words institutions use when morality finally intersects with consequences. Xavier continued his work. He did not turn it into a press tour. He didn't have to. The story traveled anyway because someone in the witness circle had posted the clip, shaky moment and all, and the captionable line, "I know a break-in suspect when I see one spread like a spark across dry grass." Ethan's attempt to control a narrative had created a narrative he couldn't control. There was a second wave too, the boomerang. In a closed-door meeting, the watch commander repeated Ethan's other line back to him, the one meant to crush identity with indifference. "I don't care who you think you are," the commander said, reading it from a transcript summary without flourish. "You said that. In a lobby. In front of witnesses." Ethan tried to explain it away. It was just a way to keep him from pulling rank. But the commander's voice stayed flat. He didn't pull rank. He asked for the reason. Ethan's career began to change shape after that, not because one powerful person demanded it, but because ordinary people had held their phones steady, and supervisors had been forced to acknowledge what the record showed. There were hearings, meetings, and discipline steps that didn't make headlines, the unglamorous machinery of consequences. Ethan was removed from field duty while the review moved forward. His sergeant documented every deviation from de-escalation expectations in plain language. The department's legal counsel advised on exposure and on corrective actions that could be defended. The city's risk manager flagged the incident as preventable. The operations manager of the facility filed a formal complaint and demanded a response in writing. And then, because Ethan didn't stop at one bad night, more came out. Another resident recognized him from the clip and came forward about a different stop. A delivery driver remembered being told to leave the area without explanation. A pattern began to form, not as a conspiracy, but as a chain of small escalations that hadn't been caught until witnesses and records forced the lens to widen. The system doesn't move fast, but it does move when enough people push in the same direction. The resolution that followed was not a miracle and not instant, but it was real enough to restore dignity. The department issued a written apology to Xavier in plain language. Not poetry, not self-praise. A statement of what happened and that it should not have happened. The facility received confirmation that any future law enforcement contact on the property would require coordination with the on-duty supervisor unless there was an immediate safety emergency. A complaint portal link was updated internally, so staff knew exactly where to route incidents like this, because the receptionist's instincts shouldn't be the only defense. Ethan faced discipline that did not stop at a quiet warning. His field authority was restricted. His conduct reviewed, his status reevaluated. Eventually, the decision came down: he would no longer wear a badge in the capacity he'd abused. Oversight procedures were tightened around rookie supervision in that area. Leadership didn't call it racism in the paperwork. They called it selective enforcement and unjustified detention escalation and failure to verify. But everyone understood what it meant. Xavier's dignity was restored in a way that mattered most to him, quietly, concretely, and with changes that could protect someone who didn't have his job title. Weeks later, Xavier returned to the self-storage office in the early evening. No uniforms, no flashlight beams. He brought a small gift bag, coffee, and pastries for the front desk. The receptionist smiled, tired but warm. "You doing okay?" she asked. Xavier nodded. "I am," he said, "because you all didn't look away." The man in the hoodie wasn't there. The storage employee was, though. She saw Xavier and gave a small, proud nod, like she'd reclaimed something in herself, too. Xavier moved through the lobby, shoulders finally loose. His phone buzzed with a message, a picture of his daughter holding the book open to the chapter she wanted. He smiled and headed back to his car. He had promised her he'd read tonight, and this time nothing was going to stop him. When authority tries to turn suspicion into fact in real time, the most powerful counterweight is often ordinary people who calmly insist on reality and refuse to be rushed into fear. First, keep your voice steady and use plain questions that create a record, like asking the reason, asking if you're free to leave, and requesting a supervisor without arguing about ego. Next, if it's safe, let trustworthy witnesses hold phones steady and narrate what they see in calm sentences, because clarity beats volume and helps later reviews. Then avoid sudden movements and speak your actions out loud, because misinterpretation is a common tool of escalation, especially when someone is already committed to a story. After that, prioritize safety over winning the argument in the moment, since leaving may not be safe if the exit is blocked or if an officer is threatening arrest without explanation. Finally, document what you can immediately after names of witnesses where it happened and the sequence of commands so institutional leadership can't pretend it was unclear. Some elements are selectively fictionalized for education.